Hello, my name is Dan Skipown, and I am here again this week for the Top 5 Weekly. This week, in honor of Alien Covenant, my panelist is Mr. Andrew Cabral, and we're going to be talking about Ridley Scott. Andrew, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. Sadly, I missed last week's show because for those of you who don't know this out there, sometimes Dan springs stuff on us and at the last second. And it was Mother's Day, and I had already promised to spend time with my mother, so I couldn't make it work. But I'm here this week. I'm sad that we don't have our good friend Stephen Billings here. I'm sorry I missed him last week, but Stephen, I know you're out there somewhere. So, hello, and yeah, hopefully it's going to be a good show this week. Ridley Scott is back. I would say he's back, but he's never really gone away. He's always doing something. Good show this week. Ridley Scott is back. I would say he's back, but he's never really gone away. He's always doing something. Good show.
Sorry, I screwed that up. That was my fault. I was trying to
just roll with it.
I was trying to share the link because somehow Steven shares the link while he's doing the show. So share the multitasking. He's much better at it than me. Yeah. Andrew missed the Mother's Day show. I sprung it on him a little bit. I just had an idea that day because we did not get to do the epics the night before. So I was like, all right, see if he's available. But you weren't. It's not a big deal. But you're here this week. That's all that matters. And we'll probably talk about some epics on this episode, even though we didn't do it last week. So we're talking about Ridley Scott, the man behind the Alien franchise, pretty much, with Alien Covenant. So let's get this thing started. And Andrew, what is your number 5?
My number 5 this week, I decided to take a bit of a Stevens lead and go a little wild. I had to say, screw it. I want to talk about this film. I might as well talk about it now. And I'm going to go with 1985's Legend, or as many out there probably know, this is the closest thing we've ever gotten to a live-action Legend of Zelda film. And what is crazy is that this film actually predates the Zelda video game that came out a few years after this. It's an immensely popular video game franchise. It'll probably eventually get a live-action treatment, but this is kind of the closest thing we have to it right now. And this film stars a young Tom Cruise as kind of this woodland, I would say imp, but he's not an imp. He's like this kind of fairy guy who lives in the woods, and he's got to combat evil. It's a story about good versus evil. It's a fantasy film. And if you know Ridley Scott, he's very imaginative with a lot of his films. And this film is just so wild and so imaginative that I find myself really liking it. It's I wouldn't say it's a great or amazing film, but it's very much a cult classic. I would definitely say it's in the same vein as something like Labyrinth or Dark Crystal, where it has that very passionate fan base. And there's also, like Ridley Scott likes to do, there's two or more cuts of this film that is available with different endings, with certain scenes added and things of that nature. And there's also one cut that has a soundtrack with Tangerine Dreams, and another one with a proper composer. I think it's Goldsmith, but I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, it's a proper score. But this is a very imaginative film. It also stars Tim Curry as kind of the main bad guy, just titled Darkness. The makeup work on that character is incredible. You've definitely seen that character referenced in pop culture a lot over the last 30 years or so. And it's a really cool fantasy film from the 1980s, all with a lot of practical effects you don't see done today. It feels very much something that Guillermo del Toro would remake today. It's very something along his line of work. Very imaginative. I highly recommend people check it out.
No. Legend is a fun film. It is a fantasy film that a lot of people do not know about. and it's one of those films that it did. I'm glad to see that you shed some light on that film in this episode of the show, Andrew, because it is a fun. You don't have to take it serious. You really don't have to say. Obviously, the actors are having a lot of fun in there, and they're not taking it too serious. And it was at a time in Tom Cruise's life where he was really busy. He was super busy.
Yeah.
A lot of up and coming because he was like the new big star.
Yeah, this was like right after Risky Business, but before Top Gun. So he's like in that like he's a rising star. You know what I mean? Like a rising young star. And this film is like just a really fun adventure where you don't have to take things too seriously, and it is like this fantasy, almost video game-esque world. But yeah, I just really wanted to talk about this movie.
Yeah, it's a good. My brother stole my copy. I had a copy of it. My brother took it. He says it's his copy, but it was my copy. So now I don't have a copy of Legend. So I'm upset about that. But I got a copy of this film that I'm going to talk about on my number 5. It's called The Martian. And The Martian is based on a worldwide best-selling novel. And it came out last year. No, not last year, the year before that. And it stars Matt Damon. It has an all-star cast of people like Jessica Chastain, Kristen Wiig, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Jeff Bridges, Donald Glover, Sean Bean, Michael Pena. I mean, this has got an all-star cast. It's about a woman who gives birth to a child on Mars, and the child grows up basically on Mars, and they're about to leave. They're about to leave on a spaceship, and something happens, and he gets stranded on Mars. Am I getting lots mixed up here?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You're like half right. You're like half right.
I know. I've seen the movie like 3 times. I can't believe it. I think I'm getting mixed up with the one with Asa Butterfield, aren't I?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, this one is the one where it's an expedition to Mars. Basically, not like a colonization, but like they're establishing kind of research places on Mars to learn about Mars. And Matt Damon, there's a huge storm and they have to escape, and Matt Damon gets left behind.
That's right.
Got to survive on Mars.
I know he got left behind in a spaceship, but I forgot about I was mixing my Asa Butterfield one up that came out this past year, and that's not nearly as good as The Martian. It's
no.
Of the 2 films based on someone being left on Mars. But this has got the thing about this film that is amazing to me is almost the entire film was like green screen. But when you're watching the film, you wouldn't even know this film was green screen. And they filmed a lot of it in New Mexico as well. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film. And it shows his ingenuity, what the character, the Matt Damon character can do. He has to grow food. He has to save his food because he's got to last like something like 6 months on Mars or something like that. Then they have an adventure to come get him. And then, it's a big thing. But the story is really, really good. This guy keeps you glued to your seat because you're like, what's going to happen next? How is he going to get off Mars? What are the people on Earth going to do about this guy being left on Mars? Talk with the media and then the people that run NASA and those types of people. They have to figure out what's going on and how do they get him back. And that is a huge task in and of itself, without giving too many spoils away if you haven't seen the film. But like I said, great cast, great story, phenomenal film. Was it Drew Goddard that adapted this?
I believe he did. He wrote, this was also based on a really popular novel, which I actually read the novel before I read the book, which is something I don't do too often just because, timing. Yes, it was Drew Goddard who wrote the screenplay from a book by Andy Weir. And I highly recommend people read the book. It's a lot more involved than the movie. The movie is kind of is a rather faithful adaptation for the most part. And what Dan was saying about the green screen and stuff like that, you feel like Matt Damon is on Mars. Like, you would swear he's on Mars the way they filmed this movie. And that's a real true kind of testament to Ridley Scott as a director. His visuals are outstanding throughout a lot of his work.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, you would not know this wasn't filmed on location somewhere or whatever. You, I mean, come to find out, like in the Blu-ray special and all the different green screen that they put in the Blu-ray special edition. It's like remarkable how authentic this film looks. And that's one of the great things. And Ridley Scott was coming off of kind of a bad movie, the Counselor, before that. So he came back. He came back with a lot of style with The Martian. But let's get into your number 4.
My number 4, speaking of mentioning epics earlier, I'm going to go with a film that I think is underrated in his filmography. There was a lot of films he came out with between 2000 and 2010. I mean, this guy is always putting movies out. And I'm going to go with Kingdom of Heaven. Kingdom of Heaven is an extremely epic film set during a time period that doesn't get a lot of exposure in movies, and that is during one of the Crusades. The film stars Orlando Bloom, who at the time was coming very hot off of Lord of the Rings, and I believe this was around the same time he was doing Pirates of the Caribbean. So this was the time where Orlando Bloom was really, really popular. The thing with this film, and I want to say this to people, watch the director's cut of the film. It is 3 hours and 10 minutes. It is a bit of a chore for people not used to long films, but it really expands the story and really opens up the scope of all of the details surrounding the story. And it's really just one of those things where if you appreciate giant epics, you will kind of like this. It's very much a throwback of type of a film, pretty much because it's set in that time period. But this is a film that stars a lot of people you're going to be kind of familiar with. People like David Thewlis, Liam Neeson, Orlando Bloom, of course. Nicholas Coster-Waldau is in the film, and if you watch Game of Thrones, you'll know who he is. Obviously, at the time, he was a nobody, but this is an expansive film. I think it's just a great film. It's one of those films, like I said, you have to sit down and set aside a large chunk of time to really sit and appreciate, because you are very much immersed in this world.
Yeah, and and there's not a lot based in the world of the Crusades. I mean, that's a very rare film that you get a film based in the Crusades. I don't know of any other film that's based during this time. Yeah, we have our King Arthurs and so forth and Excaliburs, but nothing's actually based. And we've had a couple of TV shows but nothing like this movie. Ridley Scott, he took some of the technology that he used in previous movies, and he expanded like the armies and expanded so it looks like you're looking at thousands of soldiers fighting each other and stuff like that.
It's kind of an epic war movie feel to it too. What is interesting about the Crusades is there were a lot of Crusades. I mean, there wasn't just like a one period of time. It went like several centuries. There was just a bunch of Crusades. So I'm really surprised they haven't mined this part of history for movies, because I know they've set a lot of movies in the medieval period, just it's set in like Europe and like England. This is like that. They never moved to like what's going on in the other parts of the world during this time, like the Middle East, or perhaps, farther east in China and stuff like that. But there's a lot of stuff that they could do with this material.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like we're getting what's the famous like priest, but they're warriors and they have like a red cross and
the Templars.
Yeah, we're getting a Knights Templar movie, so that's going to be interesting to see how they adapt that into a really good, whether if that's going to be a good movie or not. So we'll see. My number 4 is a little film that I'll tell you what, before this and after this, he's really not kind of tackled comedy that often. And even though this is kind of like a road trip and kind of like a comedy in one. It's considered one of the best buddy films. You know, it has so many genres going into it. It's called Thelma and Louise, and it stars Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis. They just kind of, you know, they're basically want to get out of their house, get out of their town, and just go away and just drive and just have fun for a while. And I think they're from like Arkansas or something like that, and they just start driving, and one thing leads into another. They're getting in trouble. They have cops chasing them, and they end up in this hotel room at one point in the movie, and they meet this kind of like young buck, kind of country guy, but he feels like he's like a cowboy and all this, and that guy's played by Matt Damon. I mean, Brad Pitt. I got my notes right here. I got my damn notes right here. I know it's.
I believe you, Dan.
I've seen the freaking movie 1,000 times, and I say Matt Pitt. I mean, I don't know why I'm getting so nervous here. I've done this 1,000 times. You know what I mean? I know it's Brad Pitt, but they end up with getting Brad Pitt embroiled into this road trip kind of adventure. And it's like, it is a fun movie. You got really good character actors in there, like Harvey Keitel and Michael Madsen as well. I'll tell you what, I don't think Ridley Scott has done anything like this before or since. And it stands alone as one of those kind of movies that you just can't put your thumb on it as, have you seen something like this before? Because you haven't. And you haven't really had anything close to this since. I mean, Logan was a road trip movie, but it's a little violent and kind of X-Men movie. But I just absolutely love this movie and the two performances by Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon. And this is basically the first appearance of Brad Pitt. So, yeah, I had Thelma and Louise as my number 4. What about your number 3? Oh, well, you know what? We're not going to do your number 3. We're going to do we had a couple actors pass away this past week. Michael Parks and Powers Booth. And so at this time, we're just going to try to talk about a favorite film of ours that had these actors. And I'm just going to go first. I like a little film with Matthew McConaughey in it called Frailty, where Powers Booth plays the kind of a police detective. He plays FBI agent Wesley Doyle, and he's basically on the prowl for this like mystery murder, like religious murder, and he doesn't know what to make of this, and he gets this. He's in like a bunch of the scenes where it's like a framing sequence at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie with Matthew McConaughey's police chief character. But I'll tell you what, he's been known to play a bad guy a lot in films and in TV shows. But I really, really liked Powers Booth in Frailty. And from what Andrew said, or was his little gesture there that he was making, I guess he really liked that film as well.
Yeah, that was what I was going to actually talk about, but you stole my thunder, so I'm going to shift. I mean, if we're going to talk Powers Booth, I'll talk about something he did in TV, because he did a lot of work in television. He was one of those guys who constantly moved back and forth between movies and TV, which we don't see very often. I mean, we see it more now than we did back when he was doing it, because he's been doing it his whole career. It's only now we're seeing the crossing of TV movie actors into TV and TV actors into movies. It's a lot more common now than it was back then. But I'm going to discuss a show that I really love, a show that is considered one of the best of all time, certainly one of the best that HBO has ever done, and that is Deadwood. It's a great kind of dark, almost Shakespearean Western. I think some people have called it it's like Shakespeare in the mud, because it's so dirty, but the language that they're using is so Shakespearean. It's a really phenomenal show. It's like a western, but it's set in the Northwest in mining country in the late 19th century, and he plays a character called Cy Tolliver, who kind of runs the local gambling place, or like a gambling place slash brothel. It's like a 2-in-1, if you will. And he's kind of just one of these guys who migrated to a lot of the mining camps and set up shop just to kind of cash in on all the people that are flocking to these places. And he was phenomenal in the show. I mean, the show itself had just a fantastic cast. Ian McShane, um, uh, Timothy Oliphant was in it. John Hawkes was in it. I mean, it's a fantastic show. The reason why I bring it up is because there's that they're working on a follow up movie. HBO is, and I'm curious what is going to happen with this character. Because I've heard that the script is all done. They were looking at it, so I'm curious. Are they gonna have to rewrite the script or whatever? But I would have loved to have seen him back in that Deadwood world. It's really a shame that he passed away, and it was really sudden. I didn't know that he was ill or anything because he's working all the time. You see him in movies and TV every year. Every year he's doing multiple things. So he kind of worked up until his death. It's a really kind of sad loss. He wasn't a huge star, but he was a really good character actor. Like he was a really great actor. It's kind of a shame.
Yeah, he was in this past year's Shield, Agents of Shield.
The Shield. Like I just saw him. I mean, he's in so much stuff.
Yeah, and also a movie, a really good Western he was in called Tombstone, which I know everybody knows Tombstone. The other guy that died this past week, was Michael Parks. Now, this is a lesser known actor, but he's kind of like in a lot of cult movies. Like if you're a fan of like cult horror movies or cult kind of genre movies, he's in a lot of those types of movies. But two movies that he was in, he played two different characters in each version of this: Kill Bill Volume 1 and Kill Bill Volume 2. He played the Texas Ranger, I got it right here, Earl McGraw, and then he played Esteban DeLeo in Kill Bill Volume 2. And so he's playing these two different characters, and it shows you the range of this guy. He's been in a lot of the Kevin Smith movies lately, some of these goofy Kevin Smith things that he's done. But yeah, he's not a guy that you may like. You might not like, oh, Michael Parks. But he is a guy that's been around quite a while. And he's been in some older stuff. If you're a fan of older films, he's been in a lot of older films as well. What do you got, Andrew?
Yeah, Michael Parks is one of those guys. Yeah, he's even, I would say, less known than Powers Booth. And it's very interesting because Michael Parks is kind of part of, that cult movie world, which is where probably Tarantino found him or knew him from, because Tarantino loves all the B movies and stuff like that from back in the day. And yes, he was in Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2. He's also in the beginning of From Dusk Till Dawn, which Tarantino was in, and it kind of worked on with his friend Robert Rodriguez. He plays the cop at the beginning of the movie. And what I really not remember from, but where I got my kind of full exposure of him was in Kevin Smith's Red State, which was a complete departure from anything Kevin Smith had done previous to it. In this film, he kind of plays this this leader of this crazy religious group. They're essentially the Westboro Baptist Church, this just insane fundamentalist group who are essentially, it's a cult. In my opinion, it's a cult. And he plays it so over the top, so crazy, that it's part satire, part horror. Because like these people are really this diabolical, they're really this crazy, they really believe this type of wild rationale about the world. And I thought he was just incredible in that film. And he was really another sad loss because he felt like somebody who was very worldly. If you ever watched him in interviews or in stuff like that, he felt like he had the most amazing stories to tell about his life. I mean, if you have, I don't know if it's the Red State Blu-ray or the Tusk Blu-ray, but there's just an interview with him sitting at his desk, and he's just talking about his younger days and hanging out with like different directors and filmmakers and doing stuff. And it's just like this guy really lived a very interesting life, and I was really saddened, just like Powers Booth, to hear that he passed away because I won't get to see him in any more of his in any more films. We're reaching that point where a lot of the people that we know for a while are starting to pass away due to old age and illnesses. We've seen it. Last year was a notorious year for celebrity deaths. This year is kind of following the same trend.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be sad to miss these guys, and I know we're going to have a lot of this coming down the pipe over the next few years, because we're not getting any younger, and neither of these great legendary actors, directors, actresses, and people that are in the film and television world are all getting older. And so all these people we grew up with, they're just getting older faster than we are, you know. But all right, let's get back to the top five. And your number three, Andrew.
My number three is a film that I'm pretty sure everyone knows about, and that is Gladiator from 2000, starring Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix, Connie Nielsen, Richard Harris is in the film, Jimon Hounsou is in the film, and this film is probably one of the most well-known not only roles for Russell Crowe, but films for Ridley Scott. I remember when this film hit, everybody was talking about it. Everybody was talking about it. It is one of the first like DVDs I ever bought. I mean, it kind of tried to bring back the sword and sandal epic, which a lot of films tried to emulate the Gladiator trend or the Gladiator feel going forward in film, and they're still trying to bring the sword and sandal epic back, and it's not working. And Gladiator is kind of one of the exceptions to the rule. I just think it hit at the right time. I don't know. It's a great film. It's a great film about revenge, about redemption, about love and adventure and action. It's an awesome film, and Russell Crowe in the early 2000s was really becoming his most popular and was doing his best work between this film and A Beautiful Mind and stuff like that. He is really showing what he was capable of, and he is still capable of great stuff. I mean, just watch the film The Nice Guys, which is a great film with him in it. But yeah, I've always loved Gladiator. Yet again, it's a film with an epic feel to it. It's set during Roman times. You have the Colosseums with all the battles and stuff. It's an awesome film, and it holds up today. A lot of the CGI does hold up today.
Yes, I definitely agree with you, Andrew. My number three is, well, we got Alien Covenant coming out this week, so why not have an Alien film on the list? I got Alien 1979, the very first film in this franchise. You know, we have the prequels and we have the sequels and so forth, but this is the first one. This is the one that got you scared at night that this thing was going to come and get you because it was so evil and so vile and so, God, Sigourney Weaver, you know, she was running for her life from this thing. But Ridley Scott directed the very first one. He's directed the last one and he directed the first one. So it's interesting how this goes full circle with Alien. And so we have a really good cast with Harry Dean Stanton, Yaphet Kotto, John Hurt, Tom Skerritt. A lot of these kind of character actors from the 70s were in this film. Nowadays, the only one you really know a lot about, well, John Hurt, who just died. You know, that was a sad day. I think we talked about his filmography a little bit on one of the top 5 weeklies because of that. And then obviously Tom Skerritt, you've seen him a few times, but the big one is Sigourney Weaver. She's the one, Ellen Ripley, that everybody knows. And this monster, nobody's seen a monster so realistic like this before, and he really frightened people with this film, and he frightened me as a child. And like, you know, when we did our horror movie top 5, I had a tie between Alien and Aliens because these are the two scariest movies I'd ever seen in my entire life. And to this very day, I'm very, very surprised that Alien Covenant did not make me scared like Alien did. And I'm kind of sad about that in a way. With that being said, let's get into Alien Covenant.
Good segue. Good segue.
Alien Covenant, I feel like he had good intentions. Ridley Scott had good intentions. I just felt like he took too much from the other films instead of trying to make an original new film with the new story. And obviously it had to connect with Prometheus. So he was kind of tied. He was tied to Prometheus in a way. So he had to take some of that plot and put it into this film. Then he tried to throw in some of the best parts of the Aliens and Alien. And I just feel like it was too much. It was too much from these other films instead of something original and something new for this film. And then to add it to that, the dialogue and just some of the stupidest things people I've ever seen in movies do, these people do and say in this film. And Danny McBride as Tennessee is probably the best part about the movie, in my opinion. I really enjoyed him. It's weird that I enjoyed him. We also have Catherine Waterston from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Michael Fassbender, I know he's in it. He plays Arthur and David. Spoiler, he's two kind of like sentient type of robot characters in the film. And I honestly, I liked him better as David in Prometheus than either one of these robots in this film. I was not a fan of this movie. I like people like Damian Bashir and Billy Crudup. These guys should be doing better work than this. And a lot of these actors that are in this film, I've seen them do better work. I think Ridley Scott has done better than this. Beautiful film with all the stuff going on the ship and on the planet and stuff like this. But pretty much the dialogue and the stupid, idiotic stuff that these people do really made me upset. And the fact that I didn't get scared, that's the biggest drawback for me, because I go to Aliens movies to get scared. I want to be scared. This film didn't make me scared, so I'm going to have to say skip Alien Covenant. Andrew?
Well, that was certainly a review. My critique of the film isn't as harsh as Dan's. I understand that where his points come from. I think we share some of the same issues with the film. I will say this: if you are a fan of the alien world, I think you will appreciate certain aspects of it. There are certain moments of the film that are kind of building blocks to an overall alien world that Ridley Scott is creating with Prometheus, with his original Alien film, and with this film. I will also recommend definitely rewatch Alien and Prometheus, because there's a lot of reference to things in those films that I think you will need in order to understand what's happening in this film, to a certain extent. You can definitely go into watching this film just as a kind of horror or thriller, if you will, but it is most definitely a sequel to Prometheus. They just didn't tell you that in the marketing, and they didn't tell you that in the title. I think what ended up happening is Ridley Scott got a lot of flack for not making a quote-unquote alien film with Prometheus, so he wanted to make something more closer to Alien in this film, which he did. The problem is, like Dan said, a lot of the plot of this film is repetitious of things we've already seen, and to the point where it becomes predictable that I'm pulled out of the film because I know what's going to happen. And once things happen, I just stood there and I was like, oh, that was an obvious conclusion to the situation. Why are these characters this dumb? That's what really doesn't. That's what really frustrates me about the horror genre and about films like this, because this is Ridley Scott. This man is capable of doing such great films with a lot of depth, a lot of intelligence in them, and then you get something like this where these characters are doing such dumb things, and it's similar to what other characters have done before in other films of the same way. And to the point where I was literally laughing out loud at times of the sheer stupidity of some of these characters. But what I did like about the film was the world building. I think Ridley Scott is building closer and closer to the original Alien film, because we have to remember Prometheus and this film are essentially prequels to that one. So hopefully, I believe we're getting another 2 films, I think, in this franchise, on this
I thought it
prequel
was one.
franchise.
I thought it was one more, but
One more. I heard 4. I don't know why I heard that, but with Ridley Scott, he could change his mind at any point, because he tends to do that with a lot of his stuff, a lot of his work. I think this film is an interesting sequel to Prometheus, but I was found myself being disappointed in aspects of it. But I still highly recommend it for people who were hyped to see it. If you wanted to see this movie, I'm not going to stop you from seeing it. I mean, I wouldn't have. I'm not even going to go back in time and stop myself from seeing this if that was possible. Dan says skip it. I say watch it if you're interested in it.
well, I mean, I wanted to see it as well. That's why I went and saw it. I saw it
Yeah.
over a
I'll
week.
tell you this: the marketing for this film was excellent. It made us want to see it. The thing is, I just think the marketing hyped it up, and the film didn't deliver the way it was. At least for me. For me, I was expecting something a little bit with more something with a little more depth that this film really didn't provide.
And now you say to yourself, what could Neil Blomkamp have done?
Ah, a lot of people are saying that, and I'm like, one, he wanted to make a sequel to Aliens, so that's something that's completely different than prequel world. But I don't even. Who knows? Ridley Scott could maybe, once he's done doing these prequels, decide to do his official sequel to Alien. Because I'm not sure what his thoughts are on Aliens. I know I love it, and I know a lot of people love it. So maybe he wants to do what he wants to do and erase Aliens, but that's just like speculation to me. I don't really see that happening, but who knows? Who knows?
All right, so it's your turn now. You're at number 2.
We got number 2. Okay. Speaking of Alien, my number 2 film is the original 1979 Alien, which Dan actually just discussed. And this film, like Dan said, is just a landmark of a film from a lot of perspectives. Because there was nothing like it at the time in 1979. We had horror films, we had sci-fi films, we had slasher films up until that point, but we never really had something, at least at the time, that combined sci-fi and horror and made it very, very scary, to the point where you can watch the film today and still be freaked out by certain aspects of it. You know what I mean? Because when you think sci-fi and horror of yesteryear, you think of, like, kind of the campiness of it, the bad effects, the bad suits, and all that kind of stuff. If you've ever seen an old Godzilla film, they're just 2 giant guys surrounded by miniatures fighting. You know what I mean? But Alien is a guy in a suit, but the way it's done, it's in very close quarters, it's very dark, it's very spooky, and the film is a lot slower than you would think. It's not as fast paced as you see modern day horror. It builds and builds and builds until all chaos breaks out. And this film is just a landmark from a CGI perspective, and just from a creature design perspective. I know that he worked with famed painter, artist, H.R. Geiger, who just recently passed away. He is responsible for really all of the design of the xenomorph, and the design of the spaceships and the eggs and all that kind of stuff. It's him. It's a guy named Moebius who did a lot of the concept art. Very interesting. A lot of the people who worked on Alien were originally supposed to work on Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune, which he wanted to do. And if you watch the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, you see a lot of what Alien would basically use for the film. It's really interesting how at the time people were already having these kind of great outside artistic thought processes on it. But yeah, but Alien is really one of the best sci-fi horrors of all time, and it really still stands up today.
And if I'm not Stan Winston created the creature effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that's another legend in the world of filmmaking, because a lot of some of your greatest monsters and creatures in film, the T-Rex and Predator, and Jurassic Park and Terminator, Predator, some of the Predator stuff. Obviously, Alien. I mean, this guy's been around. He died recently too, Stan Winston. But there's people still that run Stan Winston's studio. It's still going. Stan Winston's Winston Effects or whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called. That's still going on. All right, my number 2 is a little film that's getting a sequel. It's coming out in October. It's called Blade Runner 2049. Well, this is just Blade Runner. We got Harrison Ford plays Rick Deckard. Came out in 1982. A friend of mine named Scott Mance is a huge fan of this movie. I mean, the guy is like, he goes on social media all the time talking about Blade Runner. He did a nice Q&A with the other movie, 2049, coming out in October. This is one of the most futuristic, like, it captures when you're growing up and you're trying to watch movies to discover new worlds and new places and new alien species and far off worlds. And well, this is what it is. This is what I was looking for as a kid when I'm growing up. I'm like, what is this place? I want to be in this world. We have replicants and we have people that are going out trying to kill people. We have Sean Young, which is big back then. She was a big actress back then. I think she's making a comeback. She's got a movie out right now called The Lovers. She's making a comeback. I believe Sean Young is, I think, right? No, that's not Sean Young. Get my movies mixed up. Who's in The Lovers? It's Deborah Winger. Deborah Winger's in The Lovers.
I was wondering what happened to Deborah Winger.
Yeah, Deborah Winger is in The Lovers, not Sean Young. But Sean Young had a bunch of movies back in the day. Deborah Winger was a big star at that time. I screwed this up. Also, we have Daryl Hannah, which now she's had a up and down career as well. You know, we all know her as a mermaid in Splash. That's, you know, Ron Howard's first movie with Tom Hanks and whatnot. But she was in this film, and she was really a cool character in there. And then, like I said, Rutger Hauer's in there. It's just a post-apocalyptic, kind of like a far-off future world, and it's just so amazing to look at. It's dark looking at it, but it's amazing to look at it. And there's different versions, and maybe if Andrew has anything to say about this film, maybe he could talk about some of the other versions. I have just kind of like the basic DVD version of this film. I don't have like specialty versions of it, but I'm hearing there are some specialty versions of it, and they're really, really good. So I recommend you check out other versions of Blade Runner. And this is another early film from Ridley Scott. I mean, you had Alien, then you had Blade Runner. I mean, this guy then he had Legend after that. I mean, look at the sci-fi, fantasy, horror genre back in the day that he was working on. He did so many amazing, interesting films back in the early 80s, late 70s. Andrew, my guess is your number one is want me to let you say it?
Well. Surprise, surprise, we come to it again. Dan has taken something from me. Yeah, my number one is Blade Runner. To me, it's a masterpiece. It's one of the films that I watched early on in my kind of when I was really starting to collect movies and starting to really delve into movies. It was one of the first DVDs I ever bought. It's one of the first Blu-rays I ever upgraded to. This film combines two of the genres I love the most: science fiction and film noir, and it's set in the future, and this film is just incredible. I love it like so much. Like Dan said, it stars Harrison Ford. Rutger Hauer plays the main replicant in this film, who's really striving to find a way not to die. Because what happens is these replicants are essentially androids. They're robots. They're basically just made to serve humanity, just to do manual labor or do whatever. But they have an expiration date to them. And this film is really about this replicant trying to connect with his maker and find a way not to become extinct, not to die. And it's an immensely deep film with so many different um, philosophical things in it. I mean, it's futuristic, and what is interesting is it's set in the near future. I really wish our future was as cool as the Blade Runner future. I really wish we had like flying cars and stuff like that. Although we have certain things that this film does have as well. But like Dan said, Sean Young, Edward James Olmos is in this film. If you're familiar with Battlestar Galactica, he was in that, and he is a phenomenal actor. Kind of underrated. He doesn't get a lot of exposure really at all, other than his work in Battlestar Galactica. But Daryl Hannah's in the film, and Emmett Walsh is also in the film. It's an extraordinary film, from my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't get it. A lot of people think it's too slow. Not a lot is happening, but it's all what is going on beneath the surface of the film. It's not so much what's going on the surface. It's the depth that the film is really trying to get at. And like Dan said, there are a few cuts of this film. Ridley Scott is really famous for having multiple cuts of his movies, seemingly because I guess the studios didn't let him make the movie he wanted to make at certain times. This happens throughout, but there are 5 cuts of the film that I know of. There's the original theatrical cut. I believe there's an American cut of the film. There's an international cut. There's the final cut. The final cut is the one you want to watch. This is Ridley Scott's final cut of the movie, hence the title. But this is the one you have to watch. And then there's a work print. A work print of a cut of a movie is basically the movie is unfinished. I mean, there are certain special effects that aren't done yet, maybe certain scenes that aren't finished post production on or something like that. But yeah, there are 5 cuts of the film. You can buy them on DVD. You can buy them on Blu-ray. I mean, you can buy them in certain special editions. I mean, there is a really long documentary making of Blade Runner, which is very detailed, that you can watch if you really love the film. And this film is actually based on a short story by Philip K. Dick called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And there's a lot of movies that came out in the 80s that were based on Philip K. Dick stories. Total Recall is another one like that. But yeah, it's a really great sci-fi film. It's ranked very high amongst many lists, right up there with things like Empire Strikes Back, which came out around the same time, well, a few years earlier. And this is a film that I'm super excited for the sequel. Denis Villeneuve looks like he has this world just from an aesthetic standpoint down pat, and I can't wait for the sequel. It's one of my most highly anticipated films of this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're Andrew. This is definitely a great film. And any film fan or film buff or sci-fi fan or Harrison Ford fan or Ridley Scott fan or whatever, if you have not seen Blade Runner, you should definitely see it. My number 1 is a little film Andrew already mentioned, but I got it at my number 1 because it's one of my favorite films of all time. I mean, I absolutely love Gladiator. When I saw Gladiator, I thought I was watching. I literally thought I was watching one of the greatest films of all time. There's like Shakespeare in there, and there's so much like great like writing, the dialogue and the villains, and then you got some great actors like Richard Harris and Oliver Reed. You have Connie Nielsen. Russell Crowe as Maximus Aurelius is probably one of the greatest heroes in movie history. The fight scenes, the war scenes, the Colosseum scenes. I mean, just so beautifully done for a movie that came out almost 20 years ago. And this did win the Best Picture Oscar. And I think in 2000 it was. And Russell Crowe was really coming into his own at this time with The Insider that came out before that, and a few years before that, L.A. Confidential. But he was starting to really crank out some great movies after this with A Beautiful Mind and Cinderella Man, and it all peaked, I think, with Gladiator. But a performance that I think is ridiculously underrated. This guy, I think he got an Oscar nomination, I believe, is Joaquin Phoenix as Commodus. I mean, he is so emotional. He has such a depth to his character. He has sadness. He has anger. He's happy. He's got some scenes with this little boy in the film, which is Maximus's son, and he just gives so much emotion in these scenes with this. And then, you know, he's got all these different kinds of aspects to his character. And this really was the film that put Joaquin Phoenix on the map, really. I mean, I don't think of his brother River Phoenix before this, but he had just died before. And so then you hear Joaquin Phoenix, you're like, okay, now we got another Phoenix. But this guy proves since then that he was not a one-hit wonder. He was not a fluke. He gives a phenomenal performance in this film as Commodus, a guy that's just kind of a not so good guy. He wants to be the ruler of Rome, and there's some things happening, and Maximus is like a warrior, and he kind of like, well, the real Eric, what's his name, is the leader of Rome this is when Rome was at its highest peak. And it's a fictional story. This is not a real story. Marcus Aurelius, I should say, not Eric. Marcus Aurelius is the leader of Rome at the time, and he's played by Richard Harris, and he kind of wants to give the throne to this great general, played by Maximus, played by Russell Crowe, and this other guy's kind of doesn't necessarily agree with this decision. So he's got some shady dealings and some backstabbing kind of situations going on. But you know, I'm not really spoiling much because this is a film that came out 17 years ago. So if you have not seen Gladiator, do yourself a favor. See this remarkable film. And a lot of the special effects in this film were new things that Ridley Scott came up with for this, like multiple creations of people, like expanding crowds and expanding people in a battle and that sort of stuff, like in the Colosseum and different battlefields and things like that were going on. But yeah, I had to have Gladiator as my number one Ridley Scott film. I mean, it's been my favorite for a long time. And he's come out with a lot of movies since this, but nothing's even come close to this. Like, I had The Martian at 5, but so that is our top 5 Ridley Scott films. I just want to say thank you. Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Capzilla06, and you can find me on Twitter at Capzilla06, and you can find my YouTube channel, Capzilla Productions, where I do movie reviews and stuff like that.
And you can always find me at Dan Skipell on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also at From the Fourth Row. Also, I do a series with Andrew and Stephen Billings called The 52 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter, based off of Robert Osborne's book and Turner Classic Movies. So if you haven't seen any of those episodes, I think there's 6 of them up now. I should be posting a new episode up. I should have already posted one this week. Wait, I did. I think I already posted one this week. Yeah, I posted Rear Window, I believe, earlier in the week, if I'm not mistaken. Also, I do a podcast with my co-host Vincent LaSpada called The Best Damn Movie Show, which is what the channel that you're watching right now is called. And so, also next week on the Top 5 Weekly, we are doing Rock, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson films. We could have chose a lot of different people. There's a lot of people we could have chosen or genres we could have picked to do next week. We came to a consensus. We're going to do Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think we can come up with 5 great Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson films for Top 5 Weekly. So for Andrew and myself, good night.